Here, after we had the communication and all the blessings and the guarantees, V'yashkim Yaakov baboker, v'yikach es ha'even asher samar hashosov. He took the stone that he put around his head or under his head, v'yosim oso matzeva, and he designated as a matzeva, as a monument, v'yitzuko al rosha, shemen al rosha, and he anointed it with oil. Now, the Siforno makes a very interesting point. When we speak about designating something for Kedusha, for holiness, before you actually utilize it for that, there's a designation. We spoke about Hazmona Milsa. We spoke the Gemara, if a person takes a bag and he designates it to put tefillin in, until you put the tefillin in the bag does not assume that level of Kedusha. But nevertheless, if you designate it and now you put the tefillin in the bag assumes that level of Kedusha. And the bag can't be used for anything else. But it's only because of the pre-designation. What the Torah could have said here, Vayikach oso, he took the stone and he anointed it. Vayosim oso matzeva. He designated as that special matzeva. Matzeva means that monument. So it's a consecration. First he consecrated it. And after he consecrates it, then he anoints it with the oil. It's not he just took a stone and an ordinary stone or this stone. First there was an intentional consecration, and then he anoints it with the oil. So over here, Chazal make the point. Initially, the Torah tells us he took the stones, plural, and when he awoke, it was one stone. You take a look back before on Pasuk Yud Aleph. Rashi, V'yosem Rashosov. Hischilu, he says, Hischilu b'rivu zu. He began. The stones began quarreling with one another. Zosomer solai yonich tzadik esrosho. Each stone said, "Let the tzaddik put his head upon me." Zosomer solai yonich. Miyad osla kodesh baruch hu even achas. So to make peace among the stones, Hashem fused the stones into one stone. Zoshenemar, and therefore it says when he awoke, it was a single stone, although when he went to sleep, there were many stones. When he awoke, it was what? It was one stone, because the stones were fused into one. What's the whole concept? Stones are inanimate. The stones were fighting. Each one said, let the tzaddik put his head upon me. What is this about? So we discussed this in the past. Nothing exists in existence unless Hashem provides the energy for that to manifest itself into the physical. And everything is through angels. The value of the angel is to accommodate God's will and allow things to manifest themselves, function in a certain capacity in this world. What is the objective of creation? God's glory. That's its objective. Who is the one who actually represents that objective? The tzaddik. Yaakov was one of the most unique human beings who ever walked the face of the earth. He is the Bechir Sheba'ovos. He's the most special of the patriarchs. He's the one who fathered the Yud Bei Shvatim, the 12 tribes. Therefore, the angels, that's a spiritual power behind these stones, which allow the stone to manifest itself into a physical. Each one, in terms of its value, its function, the angel, it wants to bring about the greatest level of God's glory in terms of that's the way it should be implemented and be actualized in that context. That's the quarreling among the stones. It's not the inanimate stones we're arguing. It's like we read originally, God created two large luminaries. Then the Torah says there was the larger and the small luminary, the sun and the moon. What, the sun and moon? They talk to one another. They came before Hashem. We're talking about the Malochim, the angels, which represent the moon and the sun. Each one said to Hashem, how could you have two kings wearing one crown? One has to be primary, second one has to be secondary. So Hashem says to the moon, if that's the case, you'll be minimized. You'll be the smaller of the two. So we're not talking about the physical sun. We're speaking about the spiritual energy, which is represented through the Maloch, who's the one who actualizes it from the spiritual to physical. They are the ones who spoke. The whole idea of idolatry. They worship the sun. They worship the physical sun, not worshiping the physical sun. There's a deity, there's a Maloch, which represents the sun and represents the moon. Those are the sun worshippers and the moon worshippers, or any other, whatever they worship. When they worship nature, it's not the physical wheat or the spelt crop and the wheat crop, as we spoke about in Mitzrayim. When the spelt crop wasn't destroyed and this crop wasn't destroyed, Paro understood God is not the omnipotent being. It had to do with powers. So when we speak about the stones quarreling or fighting with one another, Hashem fused them together, they become one. We say in Kaddish, Ose Shalom Bimromov. Hashem brings peace in the exalted locations, right? Ose Shalom Bimromov, Huyase Shalom Aleinu. When the Shalom Bimromov, then the Shalom upon us. We have archangels which represent every one of the nations. When they themselves are not united with one objective, so if Ose Shalom Bimromov, they appreciate who we are, then Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. Then there's peace upon us. But if each one is vying to do something, act independent of the other, then there's a problem. Then there's no shalom for the Jews. If the Jews would be where they should be, then it's Ose Shalom Bimromov, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. That's a consequence of that. But it's the same idea. The nations, who are the nations? Each one's represented by an archangel. I always said this in the past. The Nazis, Yamach Shmam, you had Rommel, he was the famous the desert fox. They in terms of strategizing how to go to war, they were geniuses. They had a way of understanding all the tactics and how. And they said if they would have followed orders, the Germans would have won the war. But because there were certain mistakes made and they didn't follow the orders which originally were in place, that's the reason why they lost the war. I mean, how do they come up with such insights? Everything, and this the Maral says regarding to Paro, everything is directed by that archangel. That archangel which is manifests itself in the people, that archangel allows them to function in a certain capacity. Therefore, they have abilities and understandings because it all comes through that archangel. So the geniuses of that, you can have other geniuses, equal IQs, but the ability to do things as they did, those insights, every one of them, this all emanates from the archangel. That's how it works. 1 second. So therefore, when we speak about anything, the stones, the nations, whatever they are, like we spoke about, we find that Paro called the Jewish midwives, and he said to them, I want you to kill the male children that are being born. So it says when he called them, so the Ramal cites a midrash, he wanted to have relations with them. What does one thing have to another? He called them first to have a relation with them, and then he would give them the order, kill the male children. So he cites a Gemara that the Gemara says that it's based on a pasuk that when a man has relations with a woman, it says the man who cohabits with a woman, he actually has an overwhelming influence on the woman that he has relations with. So by having relations with her, with Yocheved and Miriam, they would be susceptible to his influences, and they would accept his order. They told him, he'd go off a cliff. No way. As a result of that, so they weren't agreeable, but he says, I'm giving you an order, whether you like it or not, kill the males. It says they didn't kill the males. But initially, what was the idea? Where did he come up with this idea that if you cohabit with the woman, then you have this overwhelming influence? He knew that posuk. It's a posuk in Novi. The answer is this was put into his mind by that archangel. The archangel that represents Egypt. How do you somehow overwhelm the Jews and destroy them? The males, how do you do it? Well, this is the way to do it. He has a sense that by creating that relationship, he'll have that level of overwhelming influence on him that they'll accept his suggestion or his order. It's the same idea.
Rabbi?
Yes, Alan.